Welcome to On the Right Side of History with Kansans for Life. Come with us as we connect the pro-life movement's past to present, uncover hidden or forgotten history, and its connections to the battle still raging today. Now, here's our host, Danielle Underwood.
A recent article published by a Kansas news operation took aim at our state's new Born Alive Infant Protection Act, passed in 2023. Its passage required veto override of abortion extremist Governor Laura Kelly and gained support from both Republicans and Democrats. The clearest goal of the article, which was thinly disguised propaganda for the abortion industry, was to smear the good name of first-time legislator Representative Dr. Ron Bryce, whose powerful testimony, taken directly from his medical experience, led the way for its passage. So this article, which the news organization will remain nameless, called his story a misleading narrative made up to try to scare people. And it said that he used a non-existent scare tactic. The headline for this story: medical experts question Kansas lawmakers' anti-abortion testimony for Born Alive law. So who are the medical experts here? And is this article, which unfortunately has been widely disseminated across Kansas, mostly to middle and smaller sized papers and communities across the state, is it correct that the idea that babies survive abortion attempts is a lie? So to answer these questions, I've invited Dr. Representative Ron Bryce, the legislator and doctor at the center of this smear campaign, and Laura Eden, an abortion survivor active with the Abortion Survivors Network, to share their stories to help us see through this propaganda and to find the truth. So thank you to both of you for joining us here today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you for having me.
We're really glad to have you. And Lauren, you're joining us by Zoom. So this will be, well, we're going to see how this goes, to have this three-way conversation. But I'm very excited to have you both here because I think your stories are so important for people to hear. And I think the essential feature of this discussion is that your stories corroborate the truth of the other one. So we have a doctor and a survivor both in the same conversation. So I'm really grateful to both of you for joining us. So we're going to start with Representative Dr. Ron Bryce. And I just wondered, could you first of all tell us about your medical background and your training?
Sure. I'm very happy to be here. Very happy to share. I am a family practice physician, practicing both family practice and emergency medicine. And the case that brought so much ire from some of the media was back in 1988. I was a resident in Fort Worth, Texas, on call at John Peter Smith Hospital, which is a large family practice training facility. And I was called to a code blue, and it was in the operating suites, happened to be in the gynecological GYN operating suites. I ran in there expecting to see someone having a heart attack or a patient on the operating table who was bleeding or some other life-threatening condition. I bust into the room. The surgeon was there fully gowned. The nurses assisting him were there. The patient was on the table, was awake. It was a female, young lady, and she seemed in no distress. And then over my right shoulder, I heard a cry. And I turned and I saw a premature male infant lying on a metal table in the corner of the room. And no one wanted to give me a report. No one would tell me why I was called to the code blue, but then it became obvious that somehow this young child had been born during the abortion procedure, and he was too tough to die because he just kept crying. And so apparently the nurses, over the surgeon's wishes, called the code blue after the child would not stop crying. And so I took the young boy. I estimated his gestational age at about 21, 22 weeks. I didn't have any prenatal records, but just from physical exam. So I knew at the time the youngest surviving babies were around 24 weeks. I knew there was very, very little hope of long-term survival. But this little guy, when I took him in my arms, he kept crying, he kept wiggling, he kept struggling. And I admitted him. I took him down the hall and admitted him to the neonatal intensive care unit. A lot of our equipment was actually he was too young for an endotracheal tube that we had and so forth. But I did comfort care, and over about the course of a little under a day, I took care of this little guy, and he finally died. And it was, at the time, I was a young man, probably 27, 28 years old at the time, and I had no idea. It was never even thought of that a baby could be born during an abortion procedure. That was, you could have told me that Martians were landing outside. I would have, thought it was the same thing, because it just was unthinkable. And so after this happened, and I signed his birth certificate, I signed his death certificate, and I thought it was probably just a one-time thing, and I just somehow was there. But as luck would have it, I was working with the public health department doing a rotation shortly after, and I discussed it with the director of public health, and we decided to do a study in the Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth County. We did a study of infant mortality cases over 3 years, and then what that is, we took babies who had a birth certificate and a death certificate that were dated within 12 months. And so, in other words, children who had died before their first birthday. And a lot of times those death certificates would just say prematurity, lack of lung development. Hardly any of them, a couple did, but hardly any of them mentioned abortion. But we went, and there were 900 and something cases over the 3-year period. At the time, we were able to go into the hospitals. These were all hospital cases. By the way, this is only inpatient abortions. The outpatient abortion number may be very, very much higher. But inpatients had medical records that the abortion clinics did not have access to. So I went in these 900 cases. I reviewed all their medical records. The public health department reviewed them, and we found 27 abortions over 3 years in that town where the baby was born alive as a result of, or at the time of their attempted abortion. And that was a shocker for me, because I had no idea that it was that common. And extrapolating 27 cases inpatient in one town to the whole country, there's, I don't know how many at the time that would have been, but it's a very, very large number of babies born alive after abortion. So fast forward years later, I came back to my hometown of Coffeyville, Kansas. Last year, became a member of the legislature, and I was honored to be able to carry the Infant Born Alive Act in the state legislature. And as you mentioned, we were able to pass a law, it is now law, overrode the governor's veto, where when a baby is born alive at the time of abortion, there is no choice lawfully and legally. The healthcare providers must provide appropriate care for the gestational age and the medical condition of the infant. Some of these infants may be under 23, 24 weeks and have very, very little chance of long-term survival, but still, we are human beings. We are moral people. We will provide comfort, and this law ensures that, as well as having the abortion clinics provide more data and metrics about these kind of cases that happen. And so it's just been an honor for me. Let me say, I'm a new politician, new legislator. It was an honor for me to be able to be in this fight and to see firsthand what we're up against. Because, Danielle, we are fighting people. Well, I won't say we're fighting people. We're fighting forces that are dishonest. They are forceful. They are very aggressive. And as you mentioned, the statewide newspaper article that calls me a liar, I don't want to mention their name either. And I try to ignore them. I initially thought, well, I'll just, it made me mad. because at the same time,
For good reason.
we were getting these letters in the mail with this terrorist letters with powder, and I don't know if you recall that, Kansas
Yes.
Bureau of Investigation. So this group is mailing us these terrorist letters. I'm getting death threats. My family's getting death threats. And so when this came out in the statewide news that I'm a liar and basically,
Yep. I want to
not
dig
believable.
into that. I want to dig into that for just a second, because
Yeah.
that was one of the things that stuck out to me as I read this article. That supposedly, this writer went to other, what she called medical experts, right? And so she went to a New Jersey doctor and got some quotes from that doctor about how you were lying and how this never happens. And it occurred to me that buried far down in that article, it talked about how you have your degree in family medicine. You were associate director for primary care at Louisiana State University School of Medicine. And you served 6 years on the Texas Medical Board before you came back to Kansas.
Right.
And I just thought it was crazy to me, the headline that focused on you being a lawmaker and completely ignored the fact that you were practicing as a physician, and you had a personal story that you were bringing. And from what I heard, I was not physically in the courtroom. I was in the legislature, as you were giving your testimony, both in committee and then on the floor. But I heard that there were some tears shed, and not from just the people who we would necessarily expect to hear from. So the fact is, your story struck a chord because people realized the truth. They realized the truth of it, and they couldn't deny it. And that led to Republicans and Democrats voting to pass this bill, not only through both chambers, but then needing a supermajority to pass this veto override, and you all got it done. So I think that speaks volumes about the truth, that the truth resonates. When people hear the truth, they know it. And I think I wanted to ask you, so the ones who voted against the Born Alive Infants Protection Act, what, in the clearest, most direct terms, what did those legislators actually vote for?
Infanticide. Actually, I think, Danielle, you've done a great job of describing this, but let me just be a little more blunt. This is not actually an abortion bill that we passed. It's an anti-infanticide bill, because it does not address only aborted babies that were born alive. It's any baby born alive, whether or not they're the result of an abortion. So when you have the firsthand experience of holding one of these babies, they're crying, they're wiggling, they're struggling against something they can't comprehend, and do these people really want us to set them aside to die? Do they really want us to take their lives after they're already born and qualify for a birth certificate? I can't even wrap my mind around what the other side thinks when it comes to infanticide. Have we really come to the point in our society to where babies that are born alive do not have rights and they can be killed? I know it's welling up in me right now, just the emotion of this time that we live in. And I want to just state in the clearest terms. You mentioned, and I appreciate it, you mentioned the article that was derogatory about me. I struggled with how to, and you may understand better than me about this, but how do you respond to lies and attacks and ad hominem attacks and made up things? If I get in the mud and I throw mud because somebody's throwing mud at me, it's not effective. But I think the only response we have as pro-lifers, as those who believe in traditional American values, is to tell the truth consistently, tell it constantly. Do not succumb to the lies that a baby is a clump of tissue, the lies that, for instance, a man can become a woman. We need to constantly and persistently tell the truth about these things. So it's difficult. Honestly, it's difficult for me to recount this story that I have, because it bothers me still what I saw, but it must be told. And I think you have another guest on here who will also have a perspective on this. But
That's a really good
It's
segue.
something that we need to be consistent with, Danielle.
Yes. So, Lauren, according to this so-called news source and others, you don't exist. Is that true?
That is not true. I'm in fact a human being. I'm alive and well.
I kind of thought that. Yeah. You look really real. So tell us more about your story. I know that you're a wife and you're a mom of 3 boys, and you're a second trimester D&E abortion survivor. That is wow. That you must have quite a story, and I would love for our listeners to be able to hear your story now.
Well, I was equally as shocked as you are finding out my story for the very first time. I actually grew up in a very loving Christian family. I was raised by my biological parents, and I'm one of 3 girls. So I have 2 younger sisters. And now I have 3 boys of my own. But when I was 21 years old, I actually was pursuing a degree in broadcast journalism from the University of Georgia. And my senior year, God just kind of redirected my plans. And I moved back home after I graduated from college. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. And that summer, my mom came into my room one day. It was actually June 20th of 2004. And I was unpacking. I had gone on a youth retreat with the students from my church, and I was unpacking after that trip. And my mom came into my room and asked me what I was doing that day. And I said, well, nothing, just unpacking. And she said, well, I have something I need to talk to you about. And immediately her eyes just welled up with tears. And I went, oh no, this can't be good news. So she closed my door and she came and sat down on my bed. And she proceeded to tell me that although I had known growing up that I was born premature, I was born at 26 weeks, and that my parents had met as college students and gotten pregnant with me, I had no idea all of the circumstances that led up to my premature birth. And so my mom began to tell me my story. And basically what happened is that my mom was a freshman in college when she found out that she was pregnant with me. My dad was a senior. My mom was on a full ride scholarship to the University of Arkansas. And she had a plan of going to law school or going into engineering. And she was one of the first people in her family to go to college. And so her mind was really set on pursuing her dreams of graduating and being one of the first generations to graduate from college. And when she found out she was pregnant, she felt like this circumstance was going to completely derail her plans. She didn't really view what was growing inside of her as a baby. She really just viewed it as a problem. And she went to tell my dad that she wanted to have an abortion. And my dad was actually very against my mom's plan and begged her to reconsider. Well, my mom had her mind made up. And so she left my dad's apartment and she asked a friend to take her to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And she booked an appointment with a clinic in Tulsa, and that clinic did abortions up to 12 weeks. When my mom got to the address that was listed in the phone book, the clinic was actually closed. There was no clinic at the address that she went to. And so she found a payphone and she called the clinic, and they told her that they had moved to the other side of town and that they were going to miss her appointment window. So she was going to have to reschedule her procedure. So she was frustrated. She left Tulsa, went back to the University of Arkansas, and made another appointment that week and went back to the clinic in Tulsa. And when she got there, they did an ultrasound to determine how many weeks pregnant that she was. And when they did the ultrasound, she knew from her confirmation of pregnancy visit that she should have been about 10 weeks pregnant. But the circumference of my head measured just over 13 weeks pregnant. And in Oklahoma at the time, they only did abortions up to 12 weeks. And so that clinic turned her away, and they told her they couldn't go through with the procedure. Well, my mom knew that she could get an abortion up to 15 weeks at a clinic in Little Rock. So she left and went back to the University of Arkansas. She made an appointment at an abortion clinic in Little Rock, and she called another friend who agreed to drive her to the clinic. And she asked my dad to drive her to the friend's house. Very hesitantly, my dad agreed to drive her. And as they were driving through the mountains of northern Arkansas, my mom laid down on my dad's lap, and my dad put his hand on her stomach. And as my mom slept, my dad began to pray, and he just begged that God that he would please intervene in my life. And as they were driving through the mountains, this huge cloud of fog just kind of came out of nowhere and landed right in front of them. And my dad couldn't see anymore. He says he couldn't even see the hood ornament on the front of his car. Wow. And my mom woke up and was pleading with my dad to continue driving because she was very determined to get to this clinic. And my dad didn't feel safe and felt that they needed to turn back. Well, eventually he kept going, and eventually they got to a point where they couldn't see anything, and it was dangerous for them to continue driving. And so they turned around, they went back home, and she rescheduled her appointment once again. So this friend came and picked her up and drove her to the clinic in Little Rock the following day. And when they got to the clinic, they did another ultrasound. That clinic did abortions up to 15 weeks. And when they measured the head circumference, my head measured 15.3 weeks gestation, which didn't make any sense compared to the numbers that they had given her in Tulsa. But again, they wouldn't go through with the abortion. That clinic referred my mom to a clinic in Dallas. And my mom proceeded to find another friend to take her to a clinic in Dallas. She actually took her final exams, and then she took off with her friend to go to Dallas, Texas. And she actually went to 2 clinics in Dallas. The first clinic that she went to did abortions up to 20 weeks. And when they measured the circumference of my head during the ultrasound once again, my mom measured 21.6 weeks pregnant. And so that 20-week clinic could not do the abortion procedure. My mom proceeded to have a little bit of a mental breakdown and an emotional breakdown in the clinic. And she said for the very first time, she felt like somebody bigger than her was trying to prevent her from going through with this. It just felt like every plan that she made seemed to fail. So that clinic referred her to a clinic on the other side of Dallas that did abortions up to 22 weeks. And my mom confirmed with them. She said, would they please take the ultrasound results from this clinic? Because if I have to go to another clinic and get another ultrasound, I know exactly what the outcome is going to be. So that clinic confirmed they would take her ultrasound results, and she went to the other side of Dallas. And instead of doing another ultrasound, they actually started the second trimester D&E procedure. And basically what happens in that procedure is that a substance called laminaria, it's made of seaweed. It's inserted into the woman's cervix, and it begins to dilate her cervix overnight. They told my mom to take Tylenol and to go home and to rest and to come back the next morning for the second part of the procedure. And the next day, the plan was to take tools and pull me out limb from limb. And so my mom went home that night, and she was staying with her friend's sister, and she was in a lot of pain. And she started to really think through the reality of what was about to happen, and she got scared. And my dad says that the Lord laid it on his heart to call her in that night. And so about midnight, he actually called her. In fact, he called many different times, but she finally picked up around midnight. And my dad asked if he could pray with my mom. And when he was done praying, my mom told my dad that if he would drive to Dallas and meet her at the clinic the following morning, she was 90% sure she wouldn't go through with the abortion procedure. Well, my dad had a problem, and that was the fact that he had no money to get to Dallas. He had no way of getting there. And so he went to a family from his church who he was very good friends with and asked them for help. And they agreed that if my dad would go to Dallas and bring my mom back, that not only would they pay for his gas, they handed him their credit card and told him to do whatever was needed. And they also felt led to take in my mom if she was willing to save my life. So my dad took off on their dime, drove to Dallas. And when he got to the abortion clinic the following morning, he was actually running a few minutes late. And he walked into the clinic, and of course they wouldn't give him any information about whether or not my mom was there. And so he was pacing up and down the hallways just praying that somehow God would intervene once again and save my life. And when he turned around, to his surprise, the elevator doors opened and my mom was standing there, and she had actually overslept. So he hugged her, and they went in and they told the abortionist that they weren't going to go through with the procedure. He told my mom that she was taking a lot of risks and that most likely I would be miscarried if she were to leave the clinic, and that there were a lot of risks for her as well, of infection and things like that. And so my mom told him that she was willing to take the risk. She left the clinic and they began their journey back home. On the way back, as they were driving, the doctor told my mom to lie in the backseat of the car and put her feet up on the window, because it was so likely, because of how dilated she was, that the baby might just fall out. So my mom did that. She lied down in the backseat of the car, put her feet up on the window, and they drove back that way. And as they were driving back, they started to talk about what had happened over the past few weeks. And my mom began to share with my dad all of the clinics she had been to and all the obstacles she had faced along the way. And my dad smiled when my mom told him that she just felt like somebody bigger than her was trying to prevent her from going through with this plan. And my dad looked at her and said, "I know who that was. It was God. Every clinic that you went to, I was praying that God would intervene. And I was keeping up with you through your friends." And intervene he did time and time again. In fact, my dad says that there were 15 miracles that God did along the way. I've only given you a couple of examples, but there were many more. So my dad had made an appointment with my mom to go to a pro-life doctor in the Little Rock area. And miraculously, the next day when they went to this doctor visit, her cervix was 100% closed, which is a miracle. My mom also had no place to go. And so she ended up living with Bill and Jana, and this couple from my dad's church. And during the day, they would take care of their 2 young toddlers. And then at night, they would stay up really late talking with my parents about what their plan was and what they were going to do moving forward. And they were on really different pages. My mom wanted to give me up for adoption, and my dad wanted to keep me, but he didn't really have a real concrete plan about what that would look like, practically speaking. And so Jana says now that she felt like she was the mediator in the middle, that God was giving her the mission of helping bring them together. And my mom says that for the first time in her life, she experienced a godly couple who functioned as a real family, who pointed her to Jesus and were the hands and feet of Jesus to her. And that made the biggest difference in her life. So on July 26, 1982, in the middle of the night, my mom woke up and something was wrong. She was in labor and she was 26 weeks pregnant. They rushed her to the hospital. And when they arrived, the doctor pretty much told my mom there was no chance that this baby was going to survive. And that if the baby did survive, there was only a 5% chance that the baby would have no brain damage. Well, my dad and Jana stayed up all night while my mom was in labor and prayed. They were like, "God, we did not come this far for this baby to be so sick." And so they prayed that God would intervene. And at 8:23 the next morning, I was born. I was actually born in caul, which means inside the amniotic sac. And to me, that's just another sign of God's protection over my life. But I was born at 2 pounds, 6 ounces, 13 inches long. So I was itty bitty. My dad went with the nurse as they rushed me up to the NICU. My mom still had planned to put me up for adoption, and so she didn't want to see me. But that afternoon, when she was by herself, a nurse came in and asked my mom if she would like to see her baby. And my mom, in a moment of weakness, said yes. And so when she took her up to the NICU and she saw my tiny body laying there, my mom burst into tears and knew that she had to keep me. So my parents actually ended up getting married after I was on October 2nd of 1982. So they just celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. And I spent 53 days in the NICU. And although I didn't have any major complications from my birth, I was tiny. And so every day was a fight for my life.
Yes. Wow. What a powerful story. That's amazing. And, just to hear the way that God intervened in that situation was amazing. And the way, I think too, it's a testimony to the people who stood beside your parents and offered
Absolutely.
to walk with them through those difficult decisions that were being made, and really made it possible for them to, to have that kind of support that a lot of women need. A lot of women do encounter difficult pregnancies. And, it's one of the most important parts of our pro-life movement is that we stand beside these women. We have to keep telling people that we are the compassionate side of this fight, right? We are the ones who are willing to stand beside women and those preborn babies and the dads. People stood by your dad. So it's an amazing, powerful story. And you said you were how many weeks old when you were born?
I was 26 weeks.
26 weeks. And I know that I read just in the last couple weeks, I saw a story where some twins who were 22 weeks, I think, are now the youngest surviving infants. They were born at 22 weeks, and now they're healthy and they're happy and they're growing. And, it's amazing as science progresses and medicine progresses that there is so much hope for young preemies like yourself and young preemies like those 22-week-old babies, those twins. And,
Right. I think technology advancement has really helped the pro-life cause because, for instance, sonogram technology, you can almost see in real time a three-dimensional picture of a baby in the womb. And plus, you combine that with technology that now 22-week babies can survive and do well. I think that, the lie, I'll just say a lie, that the baby is just a clump of tissue in the womb or it's not really a person, I think it is being dispelled by scientific advancements, and people actually see the babies. And I know one of the biggest pro-life ministries around is the sonogram ministry, where abortion-minded women can see the baby in the womb and make a decision after that.
And we do still have our 22-week protection in place in Kansas, where we protect babies in the womb from that point on. We know that law is under threat because of our current situation and the way our Kansas State Supreme Court has defined our Constitution and really rewritten our Constitution by its 2019 decision. So we know that we have, as Kansans, we absolutely have to be firm and vocal that we will not abide by that being removed, from that protection being removed. So really quickly, Lauren, I wanted to ask you, your story is very powerful, but you're also one of, is it 400 survivors now who have connected through the Abortion Survivors Network? Is that right?
It's actually, the latest count is more than 675. We're getting really close to 700.
Wow. That's amazing.
And our stories are all very different, very unique, and just amazing. I mean, just hearing everyone's stories is amazing. And that every life has a purpose, and that God has created each of these lives and spared each of these lives for a purpose. And that's the amazing part about hearing everyone's story. I used to say that you can't argue with anyone's story, but obviously the news media is trying to argue that these things don't happen and these people don't exist, but we're the living testimonies of the truth.
Amen to that. I mean, you both are excellent examples of living that truth, right? I mean, and like you were saying, it is essential that we continue to share this truth with others, because if we don't, our mass media is not going to do this. They are not going to allow for this discussion to happen on their pages. So we've got to be the ones who take this message out to people and say, no, this is absolutely true. And it's essential that we protect babies in the womb, and that we protect mothers from this predatory industry that, this is all about, the almighty dollar to those who are in that industry, sadly. So I guess I want to turn our conversation now to, kind of going back to, you've actually tied this together really well for us, Laura, where, we talked about this media coverage. This is just one example of a really terrible article that was written. There are so many examples, and we could have an entire stack of them here today. But, what can we do about this? We have to come up with some takeaways that we as individuals, obviously Kansans for Life, our role is to really hold the abortion industry to account and make sure that this doesn't just get covered up. And we make sure that this, we pull together people to do testimony and work with legislators to make sure that these issues come to the forefront. What can individuals do? And I just want to have kind of a quick little brainstorm here. We're talking about these articles, and this particular one is actually disseminated widely through Kansas. It's given away free. This particular news operation gives away their content for free. They're funded by private donors who are obviously they have a very heavily pro-abortion stance in this. But then sadly, it gets reprinted and reprinted and reprinted. And I just wanted to talk about, what do you think people can do in their local communities, in their local papers, their local media, to try to push back on some of these extremely slanted and really dishonest narratives that they're trying to push?
Well, I think people have to keep, first of all, in mind that what you read or what you see on the internet, just assume that it's false and then go from there. Mm-hmm. That's first of all. But, when these things happen, my first impulse is to fight and to lash back at these people, but that's just counterproductive. I think we have to have faith and not be in despair. We have to have faith that if we speak the truth, if we tell our stories, if we are honest, that when people hear that, the Holy Spirit will move on their hearts. And I think I've seen that where people hear, you mentioned the tears, both sides of the aisle, when we tell these stories in the state legislature, it's because the Holy Spirit, I believe, is moving on people's hearts. And God, the results of what we are doing are up to God, but He gives us things to do. He gives us the ability to do them. The results are up to Him. And with His influence, these stories and the truth can be seen.
Laura, what are your thoughts? What do you think we can do as individuals? Obviously, you're out there sharing your story. Now, that is not an easy story to share. I'm sure you probably had to go to your parents and say, can we share this? As a family, you needed to, that was a commitment on the part of your family to share that story.
Absolutely. And that's been a journey in itself. That's a whole different story, but it's a God story of my mom really giving me permission to share. And that happened about a year ago. And I immediately, I had already connected with the Abortion Survivors Network at that point in time. But when she released me to share my story, I began to go through speakers training and practice sharing it and writing it out. And that's been an incredible blessing of being a part of this network of people, is that Melissa Oden, who founded it, her goal is to give survivors practical resources so that we can share our stories and know how to do that in the appropriate way. And actually, one huge blessing through it all has been that my mom has come around and she's actually shared her story for the very first time. And she and I actually filmed a video series together that you can look up on YouTube. It's on the Abortion Survivor Network's YouTube channel. And she shares her side of the story. I share my side of the story. And then Jana, the lady that took me and my mom in when my mom was pregnant with me, she also shares her side of the story. And there's a mini documentary coming out in the next couple of weeks that has the three of us together telling more about it. So I think it all starts with telling the truth, obviously, and being willing to listen to someone else's point of view. Because I think sometimes the way that we're raised or our circumstances bring about our values and our ideology and why we think the way that we do. And even in my mom's case, going through what she went through allowed her to actually see the truth about my life. And she believed a lie. Mm-hmm. And she believed that I was a clump of cells. And when she actually realized the truth, that changed everything for her.
That's so powerful. So powerful. And the Abortion Survivors Network, the website is?
abortionsurvivors.org.
Excellent. Well, I know our listeners, a lot of you will recognize Melissa Ohden, the name of Melissa Ohden, and because she's been really a star player and was very involved with us a couple years in a row. She's helped lead rallies with us. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman with an incredible story, and the way that she's been able to pull together this organization and really link abortion survivors has been amazing. She's playing a very important role in the pro-life movement as a whole. And Laura, you are as well. So just a couple other things I wanted to suggest as we talk about this. I think it's important that we do push back against, even at the local level, local editors, local writers, local publishers, and tell them that we are not okay. And, if you're a subscriber, they need to listen to their subscribers, and they may not like what they hear, and they may not do anything immediately about it. But if they hear from enough of us, it may make a difference. So I say, if you're in a small to medium sized Kansas town and you read this information, you're like, this is trash. Truthfully, I mean, this is not even journalism. Complain to the editor and tell them that, this is an obvious slant, and you need to be factual. You need to carry content that is giving true information and not propaganda that's just being, washed over to appear as some kind of news article. So I think that's important. And I also think that, talking with others, pointing people to this podcast, pointing people to Kansans for Life as a good source of information, pointing people to the Abortion Survivors Network. These are good sources of information that people can trust and share, and making sure that you're talking to people about it. Because I really think so many people have absolutely no idea that some babies miraculously do survive abortion attempts, and that those babies deserve protection. So thank you so much. I just want to say thank you to both of you. You're doing amazing, amazing work within the pro-life movement, just by sharing your story faithfully, truthfully, fully. I mean, you're amazing, and what you're bringing to the people is such vital information. So I just want to say on behalf of Kansans for Life, thank you to both of you, and thank you to our listeners. If you want to stay up to date on this and all pro-life topics, please visit kfl.org and sign up to receive our updates. That's kfl.org. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, which is now called X, and Instagram at Kansans for Life. And as we say goodbye, please never forget, we are on the right side of history. Truth always wins in the end. And we hope you'll join us next time. Thank you so much.